Tonight, I am super excited to welcome our sponsor, Manish Kalra. He's going to talk about AI and how it can help project managers use resources like predictive analytics, automation tools, and intelligent monitoring to optimize project resources, make better decisions, and improve project outcomes. So why would you not want that? And in fact, one of the awesome things about artificial intelligence, obviously, is that it can automate and speed up processes and make things more efficient just in general. So super thrilled to have him here tonight to talk about project management and sort of its impact by new technology. So I'll hand it off to you, Manish, and let you take it from here.
Hey, before you get started, this is Victor again. People are asking for a password.
Okay.
I am dropping another reply to Becky that she shouldn't need a password with the link copied directly from Zoom. Thank you for following up on this, Victor. I'll keep an eye on these comments on Meetup while we're going.
All right, cool.
All right, technology. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Manish Kalra, and thanks for giving me this opportunity, Justin. I work as a program manager in healthcare in Minnesota, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved with AI early enough in my career. And having gone through this for the last 2-3 years, I feel like I'm ready to share some of my best practices and learnings. I'm also part of PMI, Project Management Institute. I was the president in 2022 and past president and the board member. I'm also involved with a few other nonprofits in the state. And I also am a coder by background. So just curious about how AI works and been involved with LLM for a while. That's my brief introduction. I live in Minnesota in summers and most of the year. And then when it gets super cold, I move to Florida, which is where I am right now. Although there is spring-like weather in Minnesota throughout the winter this year. So I did not miss much winter, I guess. Little bit about me. I have a wonderful dog. And she might bark in the background. She's usually very quiet, but she is watching me right now. I also love to cook. And I do cooking classes and I donate it to nonprofits. I was also fortunate enough to get the President's Award, United States President Award from Joe Biden for my work in the community. Okay, let's jump to the topic on AI. I'm going to assume for this discussion that we have like an intermediate level of skills and expertise. So I won't go too deep into definitions. This is an applied AI group, so everybody knows what AI is. And I'm going to talk more about the background of how project management, program management, portfolio management, and how the leaders can best leverage some of the AI processes and tools available and incorporate them into their work. So that's going to be the gist of the presentation. We'll go through some slides here. We'll talk about the governance. We'll talk about some of the structures we created within our organization. I'll share some learnings through PMI Global. And some other certifications and knowledge and things like those, which would help you in your in this journey. We'll finish with some of the challenges and key takeaways for PMs and what to do next. So, basic definition. I'm not going to read that. AI is everybody knows what it is. I have a couple of interesting examples that I'd like to share. Being involved in medical industry for a while, even before AI became a thing, it was used and just not called what AI is called right now. I feel there's a lot of work in this area recently in the last year or so, and that's why it has become so big. But we have been using it since 2020, actually, right after pandemic. When one of the great examples that comes to my mind was I'm part of the University of Minnesota Fairview healthcare system, and one of the ways we saw this work throughout the pandemic, especially within the first part of the pandemic, when the test kits were out, there were not very many test kits available. The university developed a protocol and algorithm to be able to detect using predictive modeling detect through X-rays if this is actually COVID or not. Believe it or not, COVID X-rays were faster and more efficient because you wouldn't have test results come for a few days, and we needed to treat patients right away. So we would do X-rays, and using the predictive model we had, we would know this is actually COVID or this is not. So this was early on, was even 2020, I think maybe December, like November or October, like early on. So when the pandemic had just started and spread around the world. So that's one example. And the other one is neurocaps. I don't know if anybody heard of neurocaps. That's a good example, the medical industry one. I'm going to talk about neurocaps, which is the other side of AI, which is basically reads your mind and what you're doing. So it was developed in Asia by an organization to be able to monitor what the employees are actually doing and how productive they have been. So it tells you what exactly they've been thinking, their mind, and then basically based upon that, it calculates the data, how much active their brain has been for work and for other things. So not the best thing to do, but productivity-wise, they could get the data and say people have been these micromanagement a little bit, yeah. As far as the project management goes, it has 3 pillars, well, triple constraint, what we called the leadership, the technical, and the strategic before. They've been renamed to ways of working, business acumen, power skills now. And AI has a hand in all 3 of them. We'll talk about that a little bit in the next few slides. How? Ways of working. How does AI help? So Gen AI specifically helps your team meet high expectations, but the accountability is all yours. So you can ask the questions being asked of generative AI, and the accuracy, safety, and utility of the answers, the decisions made as a result of those answers are for you to own. So it can help you. You can ask generative AI things. You still have to cross-check them and validate them before you put it somewhere. Power skills, the defining your why. So Gen AI is a power skill optimizer. You wouldn't call it a power skill itself, but it's an optimizer for power skills. So provide a description of your project and how it connects to the strategy and big picture. That's an example that you could put in a context there. And then you could have generative AI build a pyramid principle and revise it ruthlessly, multiple iterations to make it sound more better. And I'm sure a lot of us have actually done that in different contexts. But that's one of the power skills for AI. It can refine the content, make it better, and make it more concise and crisp for people to digest. And why is it a business acumen? It's situational. Generative AI can play the role of expert coach in the moment. It can identify the problem. When you encounter a challenge, articulate it in clear terms of your favorite generative AI, gather the data, then you generate the solutions, and then utilize human in loop. So you check it, make sure it works fine, optimize it, and make changes as you go. So that's when the business acumen kicks in. So we'll talk about some of the examples in the next few slides and how it helps and how it specifically helps PMs. Before we get there, there's just some basic data, a lot about project management and project performance, but I've collected from different sources. A lot of those sources are PMI Global, Forbes magazines, and things like that, Gartner's. I'm not going to read through all of them, but some of the interesting ones that pop out are the last one. The Gartner's research indicates by 2030, which is 6 years from now, 80% of the project management tasks will be run by AI. 80% of the tasks, which is significant. You talk about risks, project plans, WBSs, and breakdown structures and risk logs, and a lot of those things are going to be run by AI and natural language processing. So it's significant. KPMG, organizations who have invested in AI, have seen a 15% improvement, and this was last year. We're expecting this to grow to about 20% this year. So you're already seeing a lot of people publish data on AI and its outcomes. One of the biggest things people say and think about is project managers will go out of business. I think this is another report from PMI Global saying that it will actually help aid in creating more jobs and delivering exceptional value. So they say the value is going to go up 53%. and expectation of the business benefits were going to go up 46%. So both those surveys are good. I'm going to talk a little bit about two things at how AI can help PMs, and we'll do some examples after that. One of the basic things is tactical. It was your tasks, as it said in the last slide. 80% could be automated through AI, and automation is in my world, I see it as a sort of a subset of AI. Automation things are things that are simple and repeatable that can be automated. Those are tasks. AI is more predictive and can do much more than automation. But these are simple tasks that can be automated, like scheduling meetings. We already do that with drafting emails, follow-up emails. We have tools that will go in and follow up on emails if you haven't heard a response. Reports, I mean, you could create status reports through AI and great tools available. PowerPoint, amazing things it can do now. It can do live captions and subtitles in real times. Subscriptions, you can get team subscription and record actions. There's Microsoft Bing, you can do a lot more. Outlook, there's Cortana that reads emails intelligently, summarizes, and then send you the context. So a lot of tactical things that we already are aware of that people use in today's world. The better part is the strategic. That's where the meat of the thing is. It helps you pick up better selection for projects and prioritize them and with predictive outcomes. Being able to predict outcomes. So if you are feeding your data into your systems and maintaining that data diligently, and you have a certain kind of a project with certain kind of outcomes, and if you have a similar project, it could then highlight what the outcomes of that project would be and compare to project and say this one is better. So that way it could help you prioritize some of the work in your portfolio. Support for PMO, better monitoring, both all three: time, cost, and scope. That's not a brainer anymore. A lot of intelligent dashboards are being created, and people are calling them smart dashboards, to be able to monitor real time what's happening with projects. Especially sometimes there's a top 5 word that people use a lot. Top 5 projects in the portfolio that the leadership needs better visibility on. That's be easily done through intelligent dashboards. You can one thing changes, the other thing changes itself. So a lot of logic built around that. I was listening to a podcast recently about the president of France, Macron, had used a smart dashboard on his phone. He'd asked to get a smart dashboard built where he could see 5 things in his portfolio, which is basically 5 ministries: road, transport, energy, and sectors, and finance, and those. And he wanted real-time reports on how things are going. And so they had used AI logic to build some of that. The next one is improved, faster project definition, planning, and reporting. Of course, if you can set your standards and say, I want my definition in this format, and being able to better plan and report it. Virtual project assistants, like, of course, ChatGPT is being used a lot. I use it a lot myself. Advanced testing systems. This is the area that has been of a focus lately quite a bit in IT. We're exploring some tools ourselves that could help in detecting bugs and those kinds of things with and being able to intelligently alert and monitor some of the things, and that goes well with the testing system. So really an area of interest right now is advanced testing systems using AI models, and a lot is happening around in that space lately. Number 6 is an interesting one: monitor human behavior. So if you have a project and you see a person who's on that project, and you see that person has delayed tasks over and over again for whatever reason. Now, AI can only do what the data says, right? It can go into why and ask, why is this happening? But for example, this has been happening with one person over and over again for a period of time. I can alert human behavior and say, we need to do something about it. Maybe create a personalized coaching plan for that particular team member, Or in fact, even go one step further, if that person had this before and had it in their history, when this person is being, added as a resource to a newer project, it alerts the PM. It could tell them that, there's been some coaching needed for this person before. So watch out for those human behaviors specifically. Or on the other side, you could also alert that there's been, issue with this person and with that person, and there's been a conflict. So all this data, as you collect, again, data in, data out, so you have to monitor and add that data into the system. But it could trigger some of the alerts for you to monitor human behaviors, which is what a lot of PMs would normally do. So when people say they can only help in tactical skills, and in AI can help monitor tasks and monitor administrative things that for tactical behaviors, I think this is the other side of the world where it's actually monitoring human behaviors and giving you a personalized coaching plans for the team. Is it good or bad? I think there's some ethical concerns around this with HR and so on. And so it's not being used fully. It's being used by some organizations already. They're piloting it. So it's again, an area of interest. And I also see that this is going to go beyond and grow into something more in the future. Highlight risks and opportunities. One of my favorite things is lessons learned and retrospectives. And it can be a game changer in projects. Like sometimes when you go from one project to the other, project managers wear that hat where they quickly have to transition from one project to the other. And there's not a lot of time to go through retrospectives and take it to the next project. Well, if you have that in the system is going to be smart enough to be able to do that predictive analytics and give you, hey, these are the top 5 projects that could have top 5 risks that could come up in your journey throughout this project. So be aware, human behavior could be one of them, for example, and so on and so forth. Or this issue with the sponsor, they're not very responsive, those kinds of things that we've had in the past. Again, an area of interest, an area of intense development and exploration, I would call it this time. Not a lot of organizations I feel are using this, but I think it's gonna also grow quite a bit in the near future. It's hard to say next few years, days, weeks. It's so hard these days with AI. It could just be the next big thing. I'll take a pause here and just do a pulse check. I cannot see anybody's face because I'm on my monitor. Is everything good? Does anybody have any questions so far? The pace is okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess I would just jump in and say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the group chat if you want. I'm seeing some thumbs up here from people. So
Awesome.
So far there isn't anything, but if you want to drop them in, I certainly am happy to ask them here.
Yeah, feel free to interject me, Justin, if there are any questions that come up. Happy to answer them as we go through, because sometimes it's better to answer questions as we go versus waiting till the end. So happy to just stop me whenever you feel there's a question.
We got one here. It says, where are you storing this data for you to mine? Is what Angie asked.
Yeah, so good question. I think we've been using different tools, and as a healthcare system, a lot of our data is stored in Epic, and so we use Epic as our basic repository, but then we also use Power BI and other things. So it really depends on your organization. I think it's really important to have the data in the right format, and this is one of the things we'll talk about later. Is also one of the biggest risks for full scale rolling out of AI, is because organizations don't have data in the right format right now. So what we ask people to do is to start getting your data in the right format, because when the time comes and you want to use a tool, you want your data to be ready and available at a central place, not get it from multiple sources. So really important to have data in the right format.
Good point, for sure. All right, I think we can continue.
Awesome. All right, this is an example of managing scope creep. Project managers, scope creep happens all the time, right? I want this, but also I want this, but I also want this, but I also want this. By the way, my budget still stays the same, but I can't give you more time. Classic PM world. So this is an example, and I prompted it to ChatGPT. I said, I'm a project manager developing a new mobile app. If you want to read through it, it gives you an example of a scope creep where the client is coming and asking and insisting actually that it should meet all the requirements. And the team estimate the additions will extend the timeline by 3 months and cost $50,000. The original budget was $60,000. So create a requirements stability matrix in a tabular format. That's what I asked ChatGPT to do. And it created this wonderful view for me that if you request just the basic thing that was asked initially, it's going to cost you no change and no change on the budget and no change on the timeline. But if you add this 5 additional tablets, it's going to take 3 more months and 30,000, 2 more user roles, 2 months and 20,000, again, and so on and so forth. So if you take this to the customer and say, hey, I can deliver you the mobile app for 10 tablets and no change in timeline and budget. But if you do want any of these things, here's your table, select which one do you want. Or if you want all of them, then this is how much it's going to cost. So this is so much easier to read, comprehend, and just take a quick action on. This is kind of the summary that you need to take to the executives so that they can make a quick decision for you.
That's that's super powerful. I'm wondering, like, how does it know what the cost is? Or I'm thinking maybe you might prompt it earlier on through the conversation to say, well, here's our bill rates or whatever. But
yes, so I did
yeah.
give it a little bit more prompt that this is how much this is going to cost, and this is how much it's going to cost.
Sure. Okay.
All right. I'm going to take a quick break here. I need to step out for a little second and I'll be back. But we're going to talk about how to operationalize AI in your organization. So this is a tablet format. Sorry, my sneezing and allergies. I'm back. So 4 main pillars here that we created when we were trying to establish AI in our organization and operationalize it. It was a brand new program, so we had to start from somewhere. And those are the 4 major things that we talked about are needed in order for us to set up a program, an AI program at the enterprise level. And governance was at the top. It'll be a lot about the legal, the equity, the bias, compliance, transparency, intake, those kinds of things, monitoring and monetization. So a lot of things that you need to be aware at the very top level are governance. Then you take a step down and say, in order for us to roll these things out, the new AI solutions that we get in our system, requests that we get in our system, will need to have some sort of change management practices in place. We need to develop AI literacy education outside and within the organization so our customers and members and employees are able to use those literacy tools, have the AI to have literacy to use those AI tools. There is an external level of communication that we had, and then internal communication we thought would be important for our employees and for our members and customers and patients. Solutions we talked about is, and one of the other things is also comes with the education and engagement is, and if you see this is sort of goes into all these three pillars, the workforce transition. So if there's any change in workforce, you need to educate them, or so on and so forth. That's something that you have to keep in mind as well. And solutions, you develop AI solutions at the enterprise level, the clinical level, non-clinical level, and intersecting programs. It could be multiple, it could be cloud and AI, and a couple of things combined as well. When we were developing this, one of the interesting things that came out was we have to wear and take the program hat off for a little bit, and also wear the product hat and have that develop that mindset for a little bit. Because if you're developing a product, an AI product, you have to have the product and strategy in place to be able to manage and maintain that product. So this is all still AI program, but within the program, we have to develop specific skill sets to be able to handle those products that are developed for specifically for AI in different parts of the organization. And of course, the digital capabilities slash, if you want to call it technology, it spans through. There's architecture involved, there's machine learning pipeline, there's storage and computing, there's federated capabilities. So a lot of things. And again, product and workforce comes with it. You need to train your builders, developers to be able to develop AI-related products and codes. So that all encompasses. So I think this was a very holistic overall view that we had, and that covered pretty much everything for our organization to roll out the AI program. Let's talk about the structure. So one of the things we wanted to do a good job is to, once we had those pillars established, those 4 pillars of governance and so on, we wanted to be able to have a structure that oversees our AI work. And that structure was created and developed in such a way that it had representation from different parts of the organization. So there was legal involved, there's compliance involved, there's sponsors involved, there's multiple levels of contracting involved, we had technology involved, architecture involved, everybody. So all the leaders from different parts of the organization were involved in that decision-making authority. So that oversight committee would be the body that would sit at the top, that would make decisions and approve or not approve certain things. Now, under that, we needed sort of like another structure under that to be able to frame some of the work. So if you see at the very left is the framing committee organization, which was about who needs to do what. A lot of work went into planning and creating that structure. So how often do we need to meet? Who often needs to be involved? Who are our stakeholders? So all that stakeholder analysis, creating registers, risk registers, and all that project and portfolio management was under this. A lot of thought process and planning went into it. And then the next one is the technology that we had. So there's a lot of work that was done is under technology, because then you have to be able to say yes or no to certain solutions that come to you. And we'd already seen, as the moment we talked about AI, we had already seen a floodgates of requests coming in. There were a lot of intake requests piling up that I want this tool, that my vendor has opened the AI and Gen AI and ChatGPT and chatbots. Floods of requests already had flowed in. One of the things we wanted to be mindful of was, one, how to prioritize them, those requests, in order for us to be able to make better decisions. And two, we wanted to be mindful of approving things that make sense for the organization without the risk and other things and bias and legal issues. So this committee was formed specifically for that, to be able to look at the requests. If you see under it, it had a structure to be able to do inventory and intake. So intake was such an important part of it. And I would say throughout the development of the whole program structure, intake took the most time, because I think it goes for AI. Intake for AI is so important and deep that it touches on a lot of things. And so we developed the intake protocol where we were interviewing people initially, just basic request. A lot of requests would just fly in and say, this is AI. They were flagged as AI incorrectly, so they would just go in and it's like, this is really not AI. This is automation, so I'll let the automation team handle it. And then there were certain requests which made sense and had high capital dollars associated with them. So then we would take them through a detailed intake, and there would be a clinical and a non-clinical and technology experts doing that intake. And then we would involve the vendor sometimes if it was a vendor tool, and talk to them about certain things and complete that detailed assessment. As a result of that assessment, this technology committee would then, which had experts from clinical and non-clinical world, would then come together and say, this makes sense, let's proceed with it, or let's stop this does not make sense. They would prepare the recommendation and then take it to the oversight committee for a final approval, yes or no. And so the technology subcommittee, oversight committee would make the final decision and then approve things, and then that would take in, and then they would flow into the normal intake channel for capital and other things. The second,
Manish, so somebody just said, can you give an example of what an intake is?
Yeah. I have the intake on the next slide, so I'll show you the detailed intake as is complete slide in itself.
Perfect. Thank you.
The next part that was really important was is really important in the AI world is monitoring, and we knew that we could approve things and things could go in and function, but we needed a platform or a body, a governance body, to be able to monitor these solutions over a period of time and see how they're performing. Because a vendor can say yes, 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 this just checks on all our boxes, and we will be able to provide you with the solution, and it'll enhance your manpower, or your productivity will go up, or you take away manual work. All those things are common, but when it actually works, it could be a different thing. So we wanted it to be have a body oversee that over a period of time and verify and validate that, at least at specific checkpoints. Again, if a vendor is saying something, we would not say no to that and say yes, take them by the word. But also it's important to see if it's going in the wrong direction, because sometimes AI tools can, there's an implicit bias that could seep into some of these models. And when it does, that could change the outcome. So it's really important to be able to have that evaluation and monitoring in place at a timely fashion, the regular checkpoints, to be able to look at solutions over and over again and say, yes, it's still safe, it's still working as desired. One of the biggest challenges here, which we encountered, and I can share that, is a lot of vendors are not ready to share some of the details around how they evaluated and how the performance was measured. And in the best interest, because they don't really want to, that's their code. They really don't want to share the proprietary information, right? So, but what we could agree on is what are the matrices that you've used, and there is some common matrices in AI world that vendors were aware and we were aware. We were just asking them, what about this metrics, this metrics, this metrics, and they would give us a scoring. And if it meets a certain threshold, we'd say yes, this makes sense. If it's at least meeting the basic threshold, you're good. So there's that you have to come up with the vendor on and agree with. These are, again, some of them are homegrown models too, and this was same thing applied to that as well. We had a lot of homegrown clinical models as well, which we monitored and over a period of time and made some tweaks, some adjustments. Sepsis model was one of them, which is one of the most critical patient care model, which we made a lot of iterations to as we learned. I'll take a pause here, and then we'll share intake in a little bit. Any other questions before we proceed?
Christina just asked right now, how are you verifying models? I'm assuming unknowns. That's what she said.
Yeah, so verification of models is, again, it depends on what kind of model it is. If it's a homegrown model, we know how the model is going to perform, and we know some of the scores of the model, that it's supposed to be at least this threshold. And if it doesn't meet that threshold over a period of time, then we'll monitor it and see what's going wrong. Where is it breaking? And as I said, some of the homegrown models did have that issue, and we had to make some changes. With vendor-based models, that's kind of when you hit the wall, because then they have the code. What we did agree on is every quarter, and this is across the board for all vendor solutions, we mandated it pretty much that we're only going to sign the contract if we get a quarterly business review, still QBR, which a lot of people might be aware of. We need to sit down every quarter for these AI high-end solutions. Sit down every quarter with you guys. We want to report with data which shows the performance over a period of time for all these models. And we want a discussion on why did this happen and what are the scores. And that, we've already gone through some of them, and I think that has been really helpful, because then that can also propagate some of the behavioral changes within the organization, and pinpoint some of the process issues, not just the technology, but the process issues that we need to handle at the organization level.
Interesting. Yeah, so you guys are requiring some sort of level of, I guess, observability or what's the
Review.
word?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that people know what's going on, why the answers are happening from the model.
Yeah. Yep. because the risk is extremely high if you don't have anything like that or checks and balances in place, especially in healthcare. And it could, if there's a wrong flags are raised or good flags, correct flags are not raised, it could mean a big thing in terms of healthcare.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
patient care at risk.
Needs to be explainable for sure.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
a lot of models I've seen, great examples of some of the models have been claims and reimbursements too. And again, the risk is low in those because then it's not patient facing directly. And it impacts reimbursement quite a bit. But we've seen a lot of models come through that door for reimbursement and coding and reimbursement area, revenue cycle.
Sure.
Here is an example of AI intake, and the diagram is small here, so I am happy to send you guys the original version of this if the need be. But I'm going to take some time and talk about the intake and how different teams are involved. So this is a swim lane diagram we developed. It goes through 4 or 5 different teams and sometimes committees. So the first one is the user creates a request, and we have a normal way for users to create requests. So we didn't want it for them to be sidetracked and create another way to create an AI specific request. That's what just not be a good idea. So we wanted the funnel or the way people submit requests to stay exactly the same. And then as soon as a request was submitted and flagged for AI, it would just flow into our bucket, the AI program bucket. Then the AI team would pick it up as an intake, talk to the user, or just look at the eyeball the request and say, okay, this is actually, and have that list of requests piling up in the dashboard and say, these are all the incoming requests. Reach out to the user, verify if it's AI, do the basic intake with them, understand a little bit, and then do the detailed intake with them. And that was more intrusive because then we had a list of questions. There was a questionnaire that was developed specifically for AI, clinical, non-clinical technology models. And we wanted them to answer all those things. And sometimes we needed to involve the vendor. If it was a homegrown solution, we were able to answer most of those questions ourselves. Couple of important sections that I want to highlight there were specifically, one was legal. Legal had to sign up and say it's okay. Because sometimes you could share some of the data outside the organization. We want to make sure the vendors are not using our data to make profits out of. That was a really important thing. Or sending it outside. So safety was an issue, legal was an issue, compliance, bias was a huge issue. We wanted to make sure there's no bias induced because of race, ethnicity, and those factors. So all those checkpoints were made, and then once all the teams signed off and were okay with that, then it would go to the AI oversight committee that I labeled in the last slide, and that committee would make a decision whether the solution is safe and we should go with it or not, based upon the outcomes, the revenue, ROI, and all those things that you should commonly do in project management anyways. So not taking any of that away, but there was another layer of doing this due diligence to make sure all those boxes are checked before we proceed further. And that slows down things a little bit, and it did. And so we realized that we needed an alternative process to fast track some of these small, low-hanging fruits that are low risk or no risk. There's no risk in any of AI, but there are things that are relatively very low risk and could just breeze through the process. So we created an expedited process for those things to just come in, flow in. If security, legal, and those parts are not involved, then just pass through and inform AI oversight committee versus wait for them to make a decision on it and just let it go if there was a very little capital or expense dollars associated with it. And then once it goes through there's talk about the monitoring and control pieces of it. It goes through that vetting body where once the solution is developed, it's monitored, controlled, and then it's added to our inventory list as an AI solution, so we can monitor it at an ongoing basis. Questions?
I think there's EJ had a quick question right here. He said, did you have to hire staff or manage this new AI system, or were you able to increase efficiency enough to offset the work involved?
Yeah, so we didn't hire any external staff. at this time. We moved some internal staff to create room for this work. So we moved quite a bit. If you time track all the hours and resources that are working on AI, it's huge. And we've been starting to realize that we need to start tracking time more diligently. A lot of work goes into, especially when creating a new program from grounds up, it's a lot of work. Once it's established and it's running, then that's just, the run the business kind of a model. But we do have an AI program manager role specifically for AI projects. All right. Challenges. I think one of the things we talked about was. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. There was one thing Christina had basically asked. You said it is monitored. What happens when the project closes, or do you never really close it?
Good question. So we are able to monitor projects in our tool that we have even after they're closed. If you flag them as an ongoing monitoring, then it realizes that this is an ongoing thing. Even though the project is closed in the books, the monitoring for that project is turned on, and then it prompts you every quarter that you need to produce reports or come with your reports and data to the monitoring subcommittee, which will ask you to produce data and so on. So that's something we leveraged is being able to tag those projects that we definitely needed monitoring on. Even after they're closed, we wanted to make sure the responsibility. We wanted to make sure a person who's accountable and person who's responsible to run those reports and get the data in front of the monitoring committee. Because if the monitoring committee starts owning all this, that become too much work. So you wanted to make sure the app owners and the teams that are actually on the technical side are doing this work after go live.
Cool. And one more question. They said, would you say that AI is still now, quote unquote, established? Is this an established piece, or are you still early in the process, do you feel?
Good question. I'd say we're like 70-80% there. I think the bulk of it is past. I think we're getting into that optimized mode now and getting things, Google things, making things better.
Great.
One of the things we realized that because we are, university-based hospital in Fairview together, university is very heavy on doing all the due diligence and safety and processes. And so that's why I think it took a little bit more time, but I'm glad we did take time because we wanted to do things the right way and put all the guardrails in place to make sure, we don't, this was new and no other healthcare around us had gone that far to actually roll out a full-fledged AI program. So we wanted to make sure if you're the first ones, and we've been consulting with our hospitals around the country, the bigger ones that are actually rolling it out. NOMD Anderson has one now, and John Hopkins has one, and all the top hospitals are now rolling out their AI programs. So we have been in touch with them and learning and sharing knowledge as well.
Great. Somebody asked another question. What tools were you using to support the process?
Yeah, so the intake was primarily, we just use our ticketing system that we have. The project portfolio management tool we have is ServiceNow. So that's primary for tracking and getting the intake and passing things from one phase to the other. That's all done through ServiceNow. Reporting is challenging in ServiceNow. I don't know if people have used ServiceNow enough, but not the best tool for reporting. So we use a lot of Power BI for that and other tools for that. We've dabbled into some other tools that are more agile and more sprinty based, so we could, it could be more interactive and more faster and more, strategy driven. But then we run into issues where you have one tool as the center of everything, and then you have different tools used throughout the organization. So just the mapping of those so we've been trying to just stay within ServiceNow. Not the best tool, but sometimes, it's important to maintain the integrity.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah, so let's go through some of the challenges of AI. We talked about the quality of data. I think that's really important, is to be able to collect the data in the right format and centralize the data as much as you can. and not go to different sources for data. And we found that out early on. So we've been working on our data strategy for a while. And again, AI is not always the best solution. Sometimes it's automation, sometimes it's something different. So just because there's automation involved doesn't make it AI. So just being mindful of that is really important. We talked about lack of guardrails and ethics. It was really important for us specifically to have those in place to make sure we don't expose ourselves to any risks with patient data and HIPAA compliance and other things. Bias problem. We almost encountered one case where there was a bias problem. We found that out early enough that we could remove that from the data. But we did really. It's really an important part of AI. Is one of the biggest challenges is to make sure you mine. You literally are mining for bias in situations. And cost requirements and computing power. AI is not cheap. It's expensive. The solutions we have in the system, in the atmosphere, in the environment around us are not super cheap too. Technology that supports us is not cheap either. So it's constrained. I think it's as we mature, it's also like everything else. It's going to become more affordable. Trust deficit and buy-in from stakeholders. I felt that this was a really big thing early on. But once we were able to establish and demonstrate the checks and balances in place, and number 3, as I talked about, lack of guardrails and ethics, once we had that established, we run through scenarios, we did use cases multiple times. I think that we got a lot of buy-in from stakeholders, and the trust was starting to establish. So I think that's really important to go through the practice and do your due diligence and take it easy and slow and be deliberate about it initially. It does slow down the process though. And then lack of emotional intelligence, although there've been new tools and things that I've been seeing lately that are more emotionally intelligent, but not quite there yet. I think we talked about the HR-based tools that are in question. So some of the key takeaways, again, start small and target the low-hanging fruit, use automations, administrative help available. That's simple and easy to do, and be curious, ready to learn. There's an LLM certification. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's an online certification that's available through one of the universities. The name is escaping me right now, but I did that. You go through a course and you give the exam. And that certification, there is several certifications available from the 2 major certifications available from PMI, Project Management Institute. One is a basic generative AI, one is advanced. Those are good. And there's a lot of knowledge outside available, and this is a great platform to learn what we're doing right now. Set ethics guardrails, education on risk related to data security. I think that's really important to have that early on, and that was part of our governance strategy. And data strategy, get your data in the right meaningful format. That's really important to get heads on and get started quick and easy. I think that's all I have.
Great,
Right.
we got that was awesome. I'm certain we will continue to have other questions, but there is one question real quick that Christina came in here that I want to mention. It says, once a project closes out, how do you maintain accountability?
Yeah, good question. Once the project closes, how do you maintain accountability? So I think one of the things, I think that's why when I said the 3 wings under the AI Oversight Committee ensures that when a new product is in place and the intake is going on, we involve the monitoring team as well, because there was a separate subcommittee for monitoring and evaluation. They're involved and they sign off on it and say, yes, we're going to monitor this product or this model or this tool every 3 months or every 6 months. So they're the best determinants of that. They can say this is simple enough tool. We don't really need to monitor it every 3 weeks. There's some clinical tools and models that we actually need to monitor weekly. So they will determine it. They will flag it and say this is a frequency, and that's the report that I said we take to the AI Oversight Committee before asking them to approve it. So one of the required fields for them is to make sure who's responsible, who's going to run it, what frequency, how are we monitoring it.
Awesome. one more question, I guess. Somebody asked, did you have the link to the certification you mentioned for LLM?
Yes, I can search it and send it to you. It's an online university. It'll come to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I can throw it in the chat.
Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Again, appliedai.mn. Connect with us for future events. We have a lot of stuff coming up here. Both tomorrow night, we'll be doing stuff in person, where we'll be talking about AI and business strategy, and then also next week, architecture and product management as well. But again, Manish, thank you again for your time. And we'll see everyone again next week, or possibly even next month on the first Thursday of the month. We'll be doing an event in April as well. So talk to you then.